we have a very special guest today, Dr. Laurence Brown. So can you tell us, just for anyone who's not heard of you before, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
A little bit about myself.
Well, from what I know of you, I've been following you for a long time. You've been quite active in the Dawah over the years. You've written a number of books and helping new Muslims find the religion. In fact, I benefited a lot from your work when I first came to Islam.
Alhamdulillah. Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
MashaAllah.
A lot of your videos and lectures.
Glad to hear that. Like to hear that. Like to think I had some influence on your
a lot
direction.
Of people, yourself, Dr. Bilal Phillips. Definitely, back in the day when I first started looking into Islam.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, you know, it was quite a powerful image for me seeing white Muslims. Because I remember I thought you had to be... seriously, I thought Islam was like a religion for...
Yeah.
I thought it was a religion for Pakistanis.
No, I've heard this before.
Yeah, and seeing the likes of you, Abdurrahim Green, Yusuf Estes, other white Muslims, I was like shocked. It's like, you can actually be a white Muslim.
Yeah.
And you can also wear a shirt and pants. Like, you can actually look white.
Yeah, believe it or not.
I was shocked. Yeah. These type of things had an impact on me, actually.
Yeah, believe it or not, I mean, it's kind of funny. It's not the first time I've heard that. I thought putting this on airplane mode would be enough, but I guess I'll just turn it off. But in case, it's... I mean, it's not the first time I've heard that. I remember one brother saying that when he first saw a Caucasian Muslim, it was like, wow, it's allowed. And I mean, I remember so many examples of this. I remember once inviting, I was friends with a brother in America, and he was a black American, and you know, he was telling me about this new Muslim, and I said, well, invite him over, you know, come to my house and we'll have dinner. And you know, when he arrived, my friend who knew me, his name was Abu Bakr. Okay, when Abu Bakr arrived with this brother, it was the other brother who came to the door first. Abu Bakr was, I guess, parking the car or something. He came to the door first. And he also was a black American. So he rang the doorbell, I answered. And when he saw me, he was like in shock, you know? So, you know, it was clear, you know, he was like, as if it couldn't be me, you know, in his mind, it couldn't be. And he, you know, even though he was, he was a black American himself. And then it was funny, you know, so when he got over the initial shock and we got comfortable with one another, you know, just things became good. But the same brother, Abu Bakr, I don't know why, so many funny things happened with this guy. One time I was in my office and he was just dropping by for something. And he dropped by my office and I had a patient in my chair. And I mean, to this day, I remember this patient. And in any case, he came in and he sort of interrupted my exam with this patient, which was okay with me. I was expecting him. I just excused myself and said, excuse me, and he asked for something. So, of course, I greeted him with the typical, you know, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam, blah, 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 you know. And so my patient, she sees me interacting with this, you know, this black American brother who was obviously Muslim, dressed as a Muslim, but I was in the military at the time, so I was dressed in uniform. Of course, in uniform, you all look the same, and so on. So I gave him what he needed, and then, you know, said Salaam alaikum, and he left. And she said, Dr. Brown, are you Muslim? And I said, well, yes, alhamdulillah. And she said, but you can't be Muslim. You're white. Oh, no, I'm sorry. She said, you can't be Muslim. You're not black. She didn't say you're white. She said, you can't be Muslim. You're not black. I was like,
No, I remember the first time we went to Bosnia.
Same thing?
Yeah,
Sort of?
no, well, basically...
Because they're all
white, yeah.
Yeah, they're all...
So they have the yearly janaza, for the bodies which they've identified from the massacre. So every year they have this janaza. And so there's literally like 70,000 white Muslims in janaza. And I was with my Pakistani friend, and I was stood next to him, and I nudged him and said, "Now you know how it feels." I just remember looking around, it was crazy. For me, it was an amazing experience, because seeing actual white Muslims, not Turkish white, a white European, it was a weird experience. And a lot of the time I always, because I travel quite a lot of people mistake me for like Ibrahim Green and yourself, and I've even had Yusuf Estes, believe it or not.
Wow, they must have been watching some old videos of Yusuf Estes to confuse the two of you. Yeah.
Have you ever had that yourself? Have you ever been mistaken for it?
I have been mistaken for some others, but
all white people are the same.
There's this kind of, yeah, exactly. But I think there's this, like you said, all white people look the same. But I think there are. I mean, 10 or 20 years ago, we were there were far fewer of us than there are now, and it's just a beautiful thing. I mean, I've never seen a religion that just cuts across the races like Islam. Of course, this was the wake-up point, I think, for Malcolm X.
Yeah.
It was when he came to Mecca and Medina, when he came to the holy cities, and he described in his biography how he was praying behind an Arab imam, and he noticed that there were Caucasians in the congregation. And afterwards, he asked the imam, don't you realize that there are some Caucasians in the congregation? And the imam had, actually, it's like, what, huh? And looked around, and as if he had never really thought about it, and said, oh yeah, of course, And that was very striking to Malcolm X, to realize that there were people who didn't even really think about the issue of color.
Yeah, I remember when I first got his book, I just couldn't wait till the end. I had to skip through it and get to the last chapters of his journey to the pilgrimage.
Yeah,
it's very touching. But how about your Muslim name? Because a lot of white reverts, a lot of reverts in general, they have changed their name.
Yep.
And I get that a lot. Even the other day when we was together.
Yeah.
People saying, well, "What's your Muslim name?"
Pushing you. Yeah.
Even Arabs asking me and really trying to push a name change. And I was speaking about one of the Tabi'in, George. Not many people know about him, but he actually accepted Islam on the battlefield in the Battle of Yarmouk against the Romans. It's mentioned in the Hadith, Jaja. And he actually died on the battlefield, a shaheed. He'd never prayed any salah. And I was playing with the idea of maybe we change the name to George.
From John to George. I took an Islamic name. George. I think, the name John, of course, it strikes a chord in a lot of people's minds, because they think of the Bible, the book of John, the first epistle of John, and so on and so forth. So, but I do have an Islamic name, but I still go by my westernized name.
I think it's good for dawah.
My given name.
Yeah. My father's John, my grandfather's John, and I think it's a very personal thing as well for non-Muslim family members. Of course, people have the right to change it if they like.
There are different ways of looking at it, but I've always felt that it's important to the dawah in the West to let the people in the West see that this religion is livable. It doesn't impose hardship upon you, and it doesn't, it doesn't require you to do things that you would not, feel comfortable with, or that would make you feel, awkward or uncomfortable. So, for example, changing the name, some people would find that they would feel that would be disrespectful to their parents, or they just don't want it, or they're just not ready there to that. But to change your name from a Western name to a Muslim name puts you out there, kind of makes you, puts a spotlight on you in a way that a lot of people would not want, especially initially. They may come to a point where they say, it's time, let me change it. But it's certainly not a requirement.
So tell us a bit about your books. Why did you decide to write so many books? Have you always been an author even before Islam?
No. As a matter of fact, I hated writing. And English was my weakest subject in college. High school, junior high school, grade school. Yeah, I was terrible at English. So no, I didn't write before Islam, and I consider it kind of a miracle because I hated writing. I really hated writing. I remember that I used to, my grandparents used to send me gifts for my birthday and for the holidays and so on. And my mother used to have to just force me to write a 1 or a 2-line thank you note. I just hated writing so much, even though they were sending me like money and things like this. I just hated to write. And but I think that I think a lot of reverts, and certainly this is the motivating issue for me. I think a lot of reverts, they get this feeling that they want to do something big. They want to do something really that will count for them in the akhirah. And for me, I didn't set out to write a bunch of books. I only wanted to write one book. And
how many do you have now?
7.
7, okay.
But the reason why was because at the time when I became Muslim, my first wife, she divorced me, and she took the children. She had custody of my 2 daughters. And because of the situation, her living in America, and I was in the military at the time, and I was restationed in England. So that meant that I would get to see my daughter only maybe for 2 weeks out of the year. My daughter is for 2 weeks out of the year. And so a lot of the motivation was, there were really 2 main motivating factors. One was that, I don't know any other way to say this except that I just got tired of talking. And what that means is that I just noticed that whenever I got into conversations with Christians especially, it always followed the same issues.
I know how you feel.
Okay, so what about the Trinity? And you explain. So what about the divinity of Jesus? And then you explain. What about the sonship, the alleged sonship, the alleged divinity of Jesus? And you explain. What about the alleged crucifixion? And you explain. And so, and so you go through the explanation, and it always seems to follow the same patterns.
Yeah.
And one thing that I just realized is so many of these people, they're not really inquiring about Islam. They're actually using the discussion as a way of trying to make Christian dawah to you, the Muslim. And I just didn't want to spend my time that way. I did get very tired of answering the same sequence of questions over and over again. That was kind of the minor reason. I wanted to be in a position when those discussions came up of just saying, look, here's my book. It says everything I want to say. If you're really sincere, you'll read it. And if you're not really sincere, we'd be wasting time in discussion. So that's really the minor reason. And the major reason was something that I can best express just by reference to a movie. Did you ever see The Core?
No.
The Core was a movie about how basically the core of the Earth, which has a certain circulation, becomes disrupted and stops. And so it basically is preceding what would be the end of the earth and the end of humanity as we know it. And so it's this mission where they're sending a team to the center of the earth to basically restart the core of the earth. Okay? And so they're on their way to the core of the earth, and they're a team of scientists, and two of them are talking, and one of them says to the other, basically, you're doing this to save the world, but me. And he shows his family 2 daughters, and he says, I'm doing this just for my 2 daughters. I'm doing this just to save my 2 daughters. And that was the main reason why I wrote that book, is because what was really in my mind was I was separated from my children. I didn't know when I might leave this earth. And I wanted them to have something so that if ever the day came when they started asking themselves, okay, Dad is gone, and now we want to know what he believed and why, so they would have something from me, not from somebody else, something from me to explain. And then it just snowballed. I mean, I finished that book. I felt the need for another.
Which book was this?
That was the first and final commandment.
So that was your first?
That was the first.
Yeah.
And that subsequently became divided into misguided and guided, which are, the first and final commandment was really large. And then I got it professionally edited. I cut the pages, made it more readable, and so on. Reduced it to 2 volumes that became misguided and guided. And then this book, Bearing True Witness. And then after that, I started writing novels, Islamic novels, which was a lot of fun, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, I mean, how is your relationship with your non-Muslim children? Have they looked into Islam at all?
No, it's good, and it's gotten better over time. But I think that there's just certain baggage that follows you, which is, it's very difficult to ever get rid of. For example, I mean, their mother divorced me, and it was a no contest divorce. Basically, we were in New Mexico at the time, and she just decided she wanted out. She was Roman Catholic. She had married me against the dictates of her religion and her church, because Roman Catholic are not allowed to marry an atheist, which is what I was. Yeah. But she married me all the same, and then when I became Muslim, we actually reaffirmed vows and remarried a second time because she was feeling so insecure. But despite all that, she she divorced me because I didn't want to have statues all over the house. It's kind of interesting because, subhanAllah, you think of how devoted some people are to their idols. I told her, look, you can have a room in the house that's all yours. Just make it into make it into your own personal sanctuary if you want to. You can fill the room with whatever you want to. I'll never go in there. I just don't want these statues of, a crucified Jesus, bleeding statues of the Passion, and so on all over the house. And I said, so just, put them into one room, and that'll be your room, but leave the house for the rest of us. And by the way, I'm paying for the house. So do I not have the right for this? And she preferred to divorce me than to remove her statues. But in any case, she went, I remember she went to the court. The judge was a lady. And she, the judge asked her, why do you want a divorce? And she just said, I just want out. And she said, is he abusing you? No. Is he hitting you? No. Is there psychological abuse? No. Then why do you want a divorce? I, just want out. I just want to be divorced. And so the judge put a restraining order on me against my wife's wishes and without her asking. And so, the thing is that being divorced when the children were a young age, I think it was around 4 and 5 years old, it was very traumatic on them, because they saw the issue that led to the divorce as being religion. And I think in children's minds, when they see it that way, when they see that mom and dad broke up over religion, it just creates kind of a psychological baggage that is really difficult for them to work through over time. Mm-hmm. So, having said that, I think that I think time is the great healer, and Allah is the one who can open the hearts. And
you find this a lot.
So things are getting better.
When you say with time as well, it's you see a lot of new Muslims. They have very difficult times with their family. And when they go in through it, they don't realise that with time it's going to get easier. I remember when I was actually living with my parents at the time. I didn't tell them I was a Muslim for over a year, and but when they found out, it was difficult. I had to move out, and
really,
yeah,
that's common in England, isn't it?
But that was quite easy. It was quite easy for me. But
yeah,
other new Muslims, they have it tough.
Yeah,
and
yeah, they do.
It's always more difficult when there's children involved as well.
Yep. Yeah, I've heard so many stories, but I have been struck about how in England in particular, there seems to be a very low threshold for parents throwing the kids out. I've been amazed by that, actually. The family attachment just doesn't seem to be that strong. Hey, we were talking a little bit about our tribe, the Caucasian reverts. One thing I've noticed with interest is that problem does not seem to exist among other ethnicities. The Hispanics, the blacks, and so on. They seem to maintain their family integrity.
Hindu Indians are just
oh, well, that's different.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the most hierarchical, society or religions in the world. And so that's. I mean, I just have to say that's in a class of its own. Yeah. But I'm talking about, for example, in England, in America, and so on. You don't seem to see that rift develop, not in the same way, among the blacks, among the Hispanics, among the ethnic minorities. They seem to have more family integrity than our tribe, so to speak, which seems to be very much more fragile, easily broken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think generally family ties. I mean, of course, in America, you have the Christians. They have a strong sense of family. Within the South.
Really? Well, not always.
I would say compared to England, I mean, the families are really broken down now.
I can't make that comparison. I only lived in England for 3 years, but from what I saw, I mean, from the little that I saw, I would suspect you're right. But just not always.
So you was telling us that you was in the army, the American Army.
Yep.
So, when was you in the army and what was you doing?
I was a doctor.
Yeah.
No, it was, I mean, I saw it as a good deal way back when. It was a deal where the military, it was a way of getting through medical school, basically. The military paid for my medical school. I was attending a very expensive medical school, Brown University Medical School, one of the Ivy Leagues. And so it was an issue of either going heavily into debt or this. And so at that time, the military offered this deal where if you accepted the package, they would pay your tuition and living expenses for 4 years. And once you graduated medical school, you would apply for deferment to get your training. And when it was all said and done, you would enter the military and pay them back 4 years of service for the 4 years of medical school. And So I was in the military full-time active duty from 1991 to 1999. And so I was non-Muslim I was still atheist for about the first 3 years of that. And then I stayed in another year on the contractual agreement and re-upped for another 4 years. So I stayed a total of 8 years. And it was kind of a sheltered period because at that time the first Desert Storm had finished. Okay, so I missed that, alhamdulillah. And I left in 1999, which was 2 years before 9/11. So I left. Alhamdulillah. I left. I left before the Afghanistan, the second Desert Storm against Iraq, and so on. So I was in a time when America's military was basically quiescent. But one of the reasons I got out is because living as a Muslim in the military, I was getting increasingly uncomfortable and just feeling that it was very hard to rectify to justify being a Muslim in the American military. Now I know that there are shaykh who have said it's permissible, but something happened to make me feel I just can't do this anymore. And specifically what happened is I was working as a doctor. I was always a doctor. I was, in the military you're always regarded as a soldier first and then a whatever second, but I always regarded myself as a doctor first and a soldier second because I never thought, I could never imagine that I would be, picking up a gun and fighting against anybody. And as a matter of fact, as doctors in the military, you are not required to.
Yeah.
Okay. But in any case, one day I just had a patient who was a helicopter pilot, and this basically just changed my thinking about the subject because we were just chatting, and I said, "So, what do you do for fun?" And he said, "Oh, I blow things up." And I just kind of laughed. And I said, "Okay, no, really, I'm serious. What do you do for fun?" And he said, "No, I'm serious. I blow things up." I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "There's nothing I enjoy more than, just going out and shooting stuff and, blowing stuff up and so on." I said, "What, you mean like a gun range and so on?" And he said, "Yeah, sure, okay." He was like, but he said, but the best time I have in my life is when I take up my helicopter and just lay waste to an area, just, machine gun fire and missiles and this, that, and the other thing, whatever, I think it is basically machine gun fire and missiles. And I said, well, aren't you, if you're in an engagement, aren't you realize, there are women and children down there.
SubhanAllah.
And he just kind of went, "Yeah, but it's just so much fun." Well, I realized he was a psychopath. And of course, in the military, that kind of person works, but not with me. And I realized that if we were in a time of war, which we were not, but if we were in a time of war, and I had this kind of person as a patient, I would have to face the responsibility of caring for somebody who is doing something that I just cannot condone. And it took me back to those, Vietnam War movies where you see guys just, randomly shooting out of the helicopter at anything that moves because for them this is just, target practice on human beings. I mean, it's like, did you ever see Full Metal Jacket? That scene where the guy is just shooting, and he's, ask you, how can you shoot, women and children? And he said, you just don't lead them as much.
Yeah.
And saying things like,
how can you get to that stage, unless you totally dehumanize the Muslims or whoever they're, fighting against?
But this is the military.
It's just...
the military always dehumanizes the enemy. It always, it's the way of convincing the soldiers, basically numbing their conscience so that
what's beautiful? I mean, it's probably not the time or the place, but when you do look at the guidance from Islam on these type of things, Islam does humanize everyone, in this situation. Even when you come, even in terms of chopping trees and things like that, you wouldn't be able to do this if you was in warfare.
Sure, I mean, things have to be done with conscious discrimination.
And things like that.
Yeah, you're not allowed to kill women and children. You're not allowed to kill old people. You have to have conscious discrimination in what you do, and you have to be merciful as much as the situation allows, and so on. And what I saw in the American military was just this intense, sort of Hollywoodized attitude in people, the cowboy attitude, and so on. And I was disturbed by it. And a lot of people, I know that a lot of people in the military looked at me and said, "What's wrong with him?" For being kind of soft-hearted. And I mean, I always was the soft-hearted person, and I remember even before Islam, just as an example, I used to go shooting with a friend of mine, just target practice, okay? I used to be really, really into guns. I enjoyed them. Most Americans are into it, And I remember going to this outdoor shooting range in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I lived at the time. And we were just doing target practice downrange, and a little bird came and landed at a certain distance away. And my friend just said, get him. And I was like, because it was a challenge. It's a moving target, really small, and it was a tough shot, and I lined it up, took the shot. The bird just kind of fluttered and died. And we went and looked at it, and the shot had killed the bird instantly, just right through the head. Now, that was just a little bird, and that was 19 plus 6, that was about 25, 26 years ago. Okay? And I swear, I think about that little bird so much, and continue to think about that little bird, and continue to just feel awful about it. And, I remember my friend was just so, wow, look at that shot, that was amazing. And he wasn't thinking anything about the fact that, a creation of Allah had just died for no reason. We weren't going to eat it. We weren't going to benefit it.
But at this point, you were atheist, right?
Yeah, I was atheist. So
why was you feeling like this?
Like I said, I may have been atheist, but I was always very soft-hearted, and so I think because of that, a lot of people saw me as being just different.
Still had the fitrah. The fitrah is still, the moral side of the fitrah is still active.
Yeah, and I think, part of it, how our religion teaches that you're born on fitrah, but it's your parents that make you Jewish or Christian or whatever, Well, my father was also very soft-hearted, and I think it just rubbed off from him. Now, he was a researcher, but he was very committed to humane use of animals. And I remember once walking into another researcher's office on the other side of the country. It was actually the chairman of the ophthalmology program that I went to, and I saw up on his wall a certificate that said, something like an honored member of the Monkey's Uncles Club, And I just kind of laughed. And it was obviously something made in jest.
Yeah.
Something about Monkey's Uncles. And this guy is a member of the Monkey's Uncles Club. And I just laughed and I said, what is that all about? And he said, that's about the humane use of research animals and, treating them with kindness and so on. And he said, you're not familiar with it? And I said, no. He said, your father started it.
Oh.
I said, I didn't know that. Or, something like that. And so that was my dad. And so, I always had that kind of respect for life and the feeling for, feeling for even animals. I remember when my father taught me to fish.
Mm.
People don't think about the feelings of fish very much. But my father was, very concerned about the fish. So when we caught a fish, we had to, kill it immediately. We couldn't let it just suffocate on the land.
My father was the opposite of this. He was.
That's right. He was a slaughterman.
He was a slaughterman.
Yeah.
But he did care for the animals. Subhanallah, spending a lot of time with animals. He would say that he said the most fearful thing for an animal is when it's on its own.
The most what?
When the animal is alone.
Yeah.
They're very scared.
No.
So he would always have them, in 2s or 3s. And also, he never liked it when I would go fishing, like game fishing. He used to go sea fishing, but he would eat it.
Yeah.
So he was of the belief that, if you catch it, you have to eat it.
Right.
You don't waste the fish,
Yep.
And I was desensitized to killing animals from a very young age. He would take me to work with him sometimes and let me, watch the animals being killed. So I was desensitized to animals.
Well, that's got to be pretty rough for a kid, but yeah.
Yeah, but.
By the way, they don't like to do that here.
No.
No, here in Saudi Arabia, actually, a lot of people have, cautioned against, you don't take your children to see the animals slaughtered. I mean, because of just that, I guess that and, so on.
So how long have you been living in Saudi Arabia?
It's been 19 years now,
Oh.
alhamdulillah. And it's been a blessed time.
Yeah.
It's been a beautiful
And a
time.
good experience.
Yeah, it's been wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is everyone's dream to live in Medina.
Every Muslim's.
Yeah.
But it's kind of sad that the non-Muslims don't understand.
There's so many misconceptions about Saudi Arabia. That it's evil place and
everything's upside down. My wife just always had that saying. She always used to say things are upside down. I remember when my wife is, we met in Amman, Jordan, and married in Amman, Jordan, and actually we had an arranged marriage.
Yeah.
Which was kind of a shock to the sensitivities. Yeah, my wife and I met in Amman, Jordan, and we had an arranged marriage, actually, which is a different story. A Westerner going through an arranged marriage is something truly frightening, because you're not used to that.
Clarify to anyone listening that it's not a forced marriage. A lot of people think arranged marriage is
No.
It's synonymous now with forced marriages. That's kind of, arranged marriages, just to clarify to anyone listening.
Yes, no, just another one of the misunderstandings,
Yeah.
My wife could have said no. Her entire family, was very supportive, and but she could have said no at any moment. But having had the experience of married once in the traditional manner, dating and living together, and then marrying in my days of ignorance, in my pre-Islamic days, and then having an arranged marriage as a Muslim, I would never get married any other way. Subhanallah. They have a saying in the Middle East. They have a saying that in the West, women marry for love, or they marry the man they love, and in the Middle East, women love the man they marry. And it's the dynamic is that love develops between the couple who marry with sincere intentions, so yeah.
It is a very spiritual thing, from an Islamic perspective. Allah says He puts love between the hearts. If you do have that connection with Allah, of course, there's a certain amount of compatibility.
Well, you do have to, talk to the person, and you can see their face, you can see their hands, you can, it's amazing how much you can learn from a person's hands. When I was told you can see the face and the hands, I was thinking, well, what can you learn from a person's hands? But you can really learn a lot from looking at a person's hands. You can, just look. You can see visually the hands are soft or hard. The fingers are slender or chubby, and so on. You can learn a lot from looking at a person's hands, and yeah. So certainly, you can see enough to just get an impression of whether this person would be visually appealing to you or not, and so on. But yeah, no, definitely, my wife could have said no. But the interesting thing was that when we did get married, she came and joined me in England. So we lived in England for 2 years, and then in America for 1 year. And for the entire time, I just remember my wife saying over and over again, everything is upside down in the West. Everything is upside down. I have so many stories. I mean, my wife, as far as like dispelling misconceptions, my wife was one of a family of 8 children. And she was the first to drive of all the children. And she was the only one to have a car. The only one, not the boys. There are 5 girls and 3 boys. She was the only one to have a car. Because she was the oldest. It wasn't a matter of, girl versus boy. It was a matter of she was the oldest, and, she was the one who came of age. And when she came of age, she got the car. And she was driving, and not only was she the first and only to get a car and to be driving, but she was the first one to go to college and get a college education and become a college graduate and so on, and get a respected job and so on and so forth. Very much her own person.
You mentioned this the other day, and it really stuck with me. SubhanAllah, you was telling me when you was walking through Oxford with your wife past the restaurant.
Oh gosh.
And this, SubhanAllah, this really, really touched me.
Yeah, first of all, it was Cambridge, not Oxford.
Okay.
Cambridge. But, there were so many stories. Those were our first years together. And, I just remember when we were newlyweds, so many funny things happened. Hilarious things. The British are very interesting people. They can be quite eccentric at times. And I remember one time we were just walking on the street, and there was a guy going down the street in his bicycle, and he had one of those little bicycle trailers behind him attached to the bicycle. And what was in the bicycle trailer? A German Shepherd.
Okay.
And my wife was just looking at this, and by this time we had been in England for a while, enough so that she had seen so many things that just flew against the reason of what she had grown up with. And she saw this man pulling a dog, where in her country it should be the other way around or nothing. The dog should be serving the man, not the other way around. She saw this man, pulling a dog, and it was kind of like, like I've been saying, everything is upside down. One of the funniest moments was we lived in a second floor apartment. Okay, overlooking a rather busy street, and across the street were some pubs and a late night fish and chips place and so on. And one time we were just in our apartment, and there was a woman across the street who just started yelling and yelling, and my wife's immediate reaction was, my Islamic name is Abdullah, so her immediate reaction was, Abdullah, there's a woman, she's in danger, she might be getting hurt, Abdullah. And my immediate reaction, because I could hear that whatever was happening, this woman was in control. And my immediate reaction was just to start laughing, which of course...
to see if the man was okay.
To see if the man's okay. But my immediate reaction was to start laughing, which of course made her, concerned. I mean, she thinks, is my husband crazy? And I just had to, honey, whatever is happening over there, the woman is okay, trust me. So, no, Abdullah, she's yelling, she's screaming. No, that's not screaming, that's yelling. And sure enough, we went to the window, and she is just basically tearing into this guy, and she's totally in charge. But so the incident you're talking about was kind of poignant to me, because we were newlyweds at the time, and we were taking a walk on the streets of Cambridge, and it was amazing, because there are many restaurants there, and they all have these large plate glass windows that allow the people inside to see out, and of course the people outside to see in. And so we passed restaurant after restaurant after restaurant, and my wife kept looking in a very curious way, looking at all of these people eating, at the tables. And after 3 or 4 of these places, she asked, Abdullah, what are these people doing? And, of course there are restaurants in Amman. But, in general, they're in the hotels, or they're very modest affairs, and so on, or at least back then they were, and or they're touristy, Amman is more developed now, but I'm talking about 20-some years ago. So I guess she said, Abdullah, what are these people doing? And I said, well, they're having dinner. And then, I really didn't feel like that. And with my first wife, we didn't do anything else. We always ate fast food and ate out and so on. My first wife barely cooked. And so here I was remarried with a wife who, was cooking and taking care of me and feeding me well and so on. And I didn't want to go there to eat, and also to navigate halal, haram food and so on and so forth. I just didn't want to do it. But I saw my wife, looking, and I didn't want to disappoint her. So I said, would you like to go have dinner, in one of these restaurants? And she said, no. And she looked at me and she said, Abdullah, don't these people have families? SubhanAllah. Because, it's just a beautiful thing. To her eating dinner, it wasn't about the food. It was about the family. It was about the social experience. And, we as Westerners are raised to believe that this is the high life.
Yeah.
You want to live the high life. You want to go. Yeah, exactly. This is this is the sign of success and so on. To her, this was like the sign of failure. These are destitute people who don't have,
you feel this,
families to share the experience with.
When you go to a Muslim country, Morocco, Egypt, or wherever it may be.
Yeah.
you really do feel this sense of family. You know, even as a tourist or a traveller, they invite you into their home. They'll give you the food. They're very hospitable, and this is the culture of Islam.
And they take pride in hosting people.
And family.
Yeah.
But it is sad when you look at it, and it's embarrassing, really.
You know, and by the way, cultures worldwide are becoming westernized. So you have to understand that you go there now, especially as a tourist, you find the tourist experience. But yeah, the time-honored value of Muslims, especially of the Arabs, among the time-honored values are hospitality and honesty and generosity. And among the Arabs in particular, people used to basically compete with one another on these things. They used to have a saying, to be as generous as Hatem. Hatem was an example in the pre-Islamic days of a man who was just extremely generous. So to be as generous as Hatem was, sort of a catchphrase. But the Arabs used to compete in these virtues, and in the West, these virtues are practically lost. Honesty. I mean, one of the things that is really striking to me is just the level of moral decay in the West. You find people who will just lie for $1 or for a very smaller amount of money, and you see this all the time. A lot of people listening.
You see it all the time.
A lot of people listening will object to this and say, no, I'm basically an honest person, and so on and so forth. But if you really think about it, how many people will tell these little white lies? A white lie is a lie. Okay, or something to protect their job, or somebody accuses them of something on the job that they really did do, and they'll just lie about it, to protect their position or their salary or their income or whatever. And
what did you say? But you living outside of the West for such a long time. I mean, I've been out, so I've not lived in the UK for nearly 3 years now. And when you go back into England, into the West, you actually realise how dangerous it is. When I was actually living there, you just become immune to the society. You become immune to all the dangers. In England, we've got a big problem in the Muslim communities as well. Because they're generally in the poorer communities, knife crime, gun crime, drugs, this type of thing. And if you want to live in a non-Muslim community, your children will be raised without religion. And it's not until you step out of the society and then come back, it really hits you. I mean,
when you say dangerous, are you talking about physical danger, or are you talking about religious, spiritual danger?
And spirituality as well.
Yeah.
There is a threat. I mean, London, I think there's 30 stabbings a week. And a large proportion of them are going to be Muslim kids, because it's the Muslims who are living in these areas.
Yeah.
Drugs, abortions from Muslim sisters, and this type of thing. And not only that, you've got the theological attack as well, and the danger of that. I recently did a tour of the UK and got Syrians who are recent refugees telling me that their children saying they want to be Christian, and Somali sisters saying they've become atheists, they don't believe anymore. This is a worrying thing, and they're from good families. And
did I ever tell you why I came to Saudi Arabia?
No. You didn't tell me why you actually became a Muslim as well.
Well, let's start with why I came to Saudi Arabia. But you might find this interesting, because...
Just excuse me, I have a cold, so I'm a bit...
Yeah, that's okay. But, as I told you, I was in the military, and I had married what is now my second wife, and I had made the decision to get out of the military because I just did not feel that I could work within the military and feel good about myself. And so I had made this decision, and now I'm an ophthalmologist. I was an ophthalmologist in the military, and so I had good opportunities outside. And financially, the opportunities in America were much better than the opportunities overseas.
Back then.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, even until this day. I mean, ophthalmologists do well for themselves, but yeah. I don't know how it is in England, but in any case, I mean, in general, doctors make a decent living, at least in my profession, ophthalmology. I mean, there are fields of medicine that, maybe are not as lucrative. But in any case, that all aside, the thing was that I just came upon an advertisement looking for an ophthalmologist here in the Middle East by the group that I did join, which is called Maghribi. And in any case, so I had interviewed for the position, and I was considering that compared with the other opportunities I had in the States, which were much more lucrative. And it was not an easy decision at the time. And I was thinking about it back and forth with, talking with my wife, considering the advantages of coming to a Muslim country versus the advantages of staying in America and making more money and so on and so forth. Well, right about that time, there was a couple in our area. They were both doctors, and both wildly successful. They were working in private practice, and they drove new Mercedes-Benzes every year, his and her Mercedes-Benzes. They lived in a very, very huge, beautiful sort of, trophy home. And I mean, they had all the trappings of high financial success in the West. And right about that time, their daughter turned 18, the age of majority in the States. And the moment she turned 18, she went to her parents and said, I want to live my life. She took off her hijab. She said, I want a boyfriend. I want an apartment. I want to live as I want to live. I'm out of here. And she did it. She left the home. She took off her hijab. She started living in the Western style. She started living in Zina with a boyfriend in an apartment, going clubbing, going drinking, and so on and so forth. And so, the best part of that was that she was drinking alcohol and dancing, and living in Zina. The worst part of it was that she left the religion. And her mother was just, psychologically destroyed, and she couldn't work. She basically collapsed in her home, and she just stayed at home, crying, and just saying over and over again, I would give everything for my daughter. I'd give everything to have my daughter back. And it was their only child. And my wife and our reactions were basically, you sold your daughter into the dunya a long time ago, And then we looked at our situation. We had one daughter who was 1 year old. We just said, you know what, that makes our decision a whole lot easier. And so that's why I accepted the position here in the Middle East. And the rewards of living in Saudi Arabia and in Medina in specific just are difficult to count. You realize how unimportant money really is. When you look back, just the blessings of living in Saudi Arabia and Medina in particular just far outweighed any financial benefit, any additional financial benefit I think I could have earned for myself in the West. But we got onto this line of thought talking about basically the dangers in the West, and think a lot of people live sort of in self-inflicted delusion. They don't really realize on a day-to-day basis how much risk they're putting themselves in. And
it's scary, sure.
It is. I mean,
it's terrifying.
But I don't feel it so much where I live. You know how it is in America. It's just a lot of crime is concentrated in inner city and particular areas. But it is all over, and it can happen anywhere. And
you got the theological dangers as well.
Oh, well, that's something different. I mean, that's of course the greatest danger. And what you're talking about how so many people lose their children. I think there's a spiritual aspect to this because, I've just noticed that I don't know how it is in England, but I've noticed in America, the vast majority of Muslims treat the mosque as basically a social center, not really as a place of worship. They go there and pray, but it's more a place to sort of keep in touch with other Muslims. And the vast majority of Muslims just are not the best examples of Islam. And I think what's really going on is that the kind of Muslim, if you can use the term ethnic Muslim, I don't really like that term, but as a descriptor, meaning Muslims who are born and raised in Islam in foreign countries who then come to the West, they're usually coming for dunya reasons. They're usually coming for education or money, jobs, and to make money. And they're basically making hijrah from a land of Muslims to a land of dunya. And if that is your motivation, I mean, do you really expect that to be rewarded? And so is it really so much of a surprise that their priority is upon the dunya, and what they will neglect, of course, is their children and their families? And is it really any surprise that their families drift away and, in many cases, grow up not even knowing what Islam is? It's sad.
I mean, I was in Kuwait for 2 years, and the most general thing the children have done is watch a movie. They were so innocent. And children of the same age group in the UK were they had gangs and a drug ring, and subhanallah, totally different experience. Of course, Kuwait has its troubles. There is some children who have doubts, etc. But it's nowhere near on the level of what the average Muslim is going through in the West.
It happens here in the Middle East in general, but like you said, nowhere near as much. And but let me give you a story, which will, I think, sort of bring things home for a lot of the audience. Okay, my wife is Palestinian. She was born and raised in Kuwait, and then during Desert Storm, their family moved to Amman, Jordan. Okay, and then she completed her, life in the Middle East until she met me in Jordan. Now, she was the oldest of her family, and when I met her, she thought Mickey Mouse was Arabic, an Arabic creation, because she had always seen these things on TV in Arabic. And one time we were talking about the innocence of, children raised in the Middle East. And because she was the oldest in the family, she had raised a lot of her brothers and sisters, or, helped with their raising. Which, by the way, is something else that, it's an amazing thing to see how tight the families are in the Middle East. They take care of one another and they nurture one another. Whereas in the West, if you take the oldest,
the extended families as well. It's not just the immediate family.
Yeah, but you know, in general, like, you know, if you take the oldest boy or girl in the family and say, you know, help raise your brother or sister, they see that as an imposition. They see that as, you know, a problem, a weight upon them, a restraint upon their happiness, you know, whereas here it's normal and they enjoy it, and you see them nurturing one another and playing with one another. But in any case, back to the innocence issue, she told me that up until adulthood, she remembered how her youngest sister, you know, even as she grew up into her teen years, when she would see on the television Tom and Jerry, and you know how Tom will see the female cat, and his eyes would, and you know, his eyes would sort of bug out, you know, and then his heart would sort of pop out of his chest, and you see this big red heart, you know, popping out, this big red heart, you know, popping out of his chest. He said that when her youngest sister, you know, who's named Heba, when Heba would see this, she would turn away from the television blushing.
SubhanAllah.
That was the level of innocence
SubhanAllah.
of these, you know, just the beautiful level of innocence of
something it should be.
Yeah, just a beautiful level of innocence of the fitra of the people of this area.
Wow.
Now, okay, you compare that with, you know, take even a 9 or a 10-year-old in America, and the studies show that the average child in America, by the time they're 9 or 10, have been exposed through the internet to hardcore pornography, not just nudity, but hardcore pornography. Where is the innocence anymore? And if you're losing your innocence, if you're losing your visual and your mental and your spiritual innocence at that age, what's the chance for you as you grow up? It's terrible.
It's frightening.
Yeah, it is frightening.
Sheikh, I think we'll have to leave it there for today. It's been an interesting podcast.
As well.
And hopefully, inshallah, we
always.
can do something else in the future, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So, jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.